Welcome to the Malt Miller YouTube channel, Homebrewers, and in this video, along with part 2, which will be coming next week, I'm joined by Fraser from Middlechild Brewing, and we're going to be talking you all the way through both the basics through to advanced approaches for dialing in your water chemistry. So as I've just said, folks, this video, along with part 2, which will be coming next week, is a really in-depth but also approachable guide to how you can affect water chemistry in your brews at home, the impact it can make, and also try and give you some key tips on the things that you need to focus on as a home brewer to keep it both simple but also make a big difference on the beer that you're brewing at home. Now, I'm joined here by Fraser. Fraser, thank you so much for coming to spend some time with us today. It is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Fraser is absolutely a friend of the Malt Miller. We've known you for years now, right? But also we've seen you grow in both your homebrewing career and now with Middlechild as well.
Yeah.
So for anybody that doesn't know you at home, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your journey as a homebrewer.
Probably started homebrewing, I guess, 13, 14 years ago. As always, I tend to dive in the deep end, and first beer was all grain with liquid yeast, which I couldn't find in the UK. I got my mum to bring it over from America, and obviously by that it died, it wasn't viable, the yeast didn't work, the first batch was a drain pour, but it didn't put me off. I just dived straight back into it again. And after a few brews, got some beers which were tasting really good. For me, they weren't quite doing what I wanted to do, which is why now I've sort of developed a way of treating my water that is easy, will help anybody, and it works every time. So
yeah, and I can absolutely testify to that. Fraser, you have helped me personally really understand water in so much more detail than I've ever done before. It's a topic I've always been interested in from the very beginnings of my homebrewing journey, but actually going through a few of the steps that we're going to talk about today in terms of, like, you know, the approaches that you can take at different levels. You were the person that helped me go from kind of that intermediate level of understanding with water to now somewhere where I feel I'm definitely, I don't know everything, but I know so much more.
You don't need to know everything. That's the important thing. Water can seem to be really scary. It doesn't need to be. You just need to get a couple of basic things right every time, and you're going to get superb beer out of it.
And doing something is better than doing nothing as well, right?
Totally.
When you started really taking notice and making a difference with the beer you were making and the way you were treating your water, what impact did that actually have on your homebrewing journey?
Oh, massive. I mean, as soon as you've changed something and you can taste the difference it has, it just makes you want to dive deeper and deeper into it. For example, I mean, once I nailed the water that I now do to all my beers, I started entering competitions, and in a 4-year period, I won over 50 medals. And that is all down to, not being joking, it's just down to the water, because there was plenty of homebrewers out there who are entering the same competitions as me, and I don't think that everyone was taking as much in-depth knowledge about the water that they needed to make the beer sing. And if you just do the basics, you'll get great beer. If you do a few little advanced bits and pieces, you'll get beers that are going to win you awards. But at the end of the day, it's about you brewing a beer that you want to drink. And if you're happy with your beer, you probably don't need to do too much, but it's always worth just trying to go the extra mile.
So before we dive too far into some of the nitty gritty, for anybody watching this, what are the two things that we are trying to achieve when we talk about adjusting water?
Well, the first one is you getting your mash chemistry correct. To get the enzymes working correctly, the enzymes are in your malt that are converting starches to sugar. They will do that at their optimum if you're getting the pH dialed in between 5.2 and 5.5, and generally trying to hit 5.3 is probably the best thing to do. Your beer will have a journey, a pH journey all the way down the line, and you need to get it right in the mash to get things moving in the correct order. Obviously, if you don't get that right, it's not gonna, the pH of the water in the kettle won't be right, and it won't be subsequently into the fermenter, it's not going to be right.
Yeah.
So you get there that right, nature will take its course from that point on, and you don't have to worry about it too much. But on the other side of it, you're treating your water to get your mineral additions right, to hit a certain style. An East Coast Pale Ale or a West Coast Pale Ale will have completely diverse profiles as far as sulfates and chlorides.
Yeah.
It's like when you're cooking, if you're seasoning your food with salt and pepper, you're doing it to enhance the flavors, and that's pretty much what you're doing with your salt additions and mineral additions. That's what you're going to achieve.
We were saying a minute ago that, you know, a couple of hundred years ago, people weren't treating their water, so specific beers were being made in specific regions or specific countries, because the water really suited those styles.
Exactly.
And the brews developed through over generations to be synonymous for the style, but the big thing that was making a difference from them was the groundwater they were using.
London and Dublin, hard water, perfect stouts and porters. Czech Republic, soft water. You're not going to make any stouts out there. It's all light coloured beers, which they're famous for, and they're pilsners, because that's what their water would let them do.
Yeah, and if we bring it a little bit more up to date towards today, you know, and some of the beer styles that are being brewed here in the UK and further afield, some of the breweries we've had the pleasure of visiting that are synonymous for those juicy, hazy pale ales.
All have soft water.
They all have soft water. You know, they're starting with water that's got very little in it. That gives them the perfect foundation
to build the profile they need.
Yeah.
And that's something we can do. It's easy to do once you get your head around a few basics.
So this first section, we wanted to talk about actually understanding water, understanding the impact it makes on your beer, what some of the actual composition of water does in terms of flavour and profile, right? But before we do any of that, there's a couple of ways that you can source your water as a home brewer. And this will be feeding throughout everything we talk about here today, because you know, you have choices, don't you, as a brewer? You have a choice as to what method you want to use, how advanced you want to go, and how in depth you want to go. And the same can be said for water, right? So the very first option you've got is using water straight out of your tap, right? Now, as we've talked about a moment ago, you can achieve some excellent results if you know what that water is, right?
Provided you got to know what's in the water. If you know that, you know what you're doing, you know what beers you can brew to hit that style.
Yes, but you're not necessarily going to be able to brew every style unless you're really fortunate to live in an area where the water coming out of your tap is almost empty, so that you can build everything back up to where you want to go. The other option you've got as a home brewer is using bottled water. You know, and actually bottled water is a great way to make another step forward. There are some bottled water examples out there that are incredibly low again in everything.
There's not many. There's only one that I'm really aware of, which is Ashbeck, which you can get from Tesco. I don't think anyone else has that water, but the mineral composition of it is very low, incredibly low bicarbonate, and the base minerals are all pretty flat, 5, 6, 7, so practically RO quality.
Really. Just gives you an excellent foundation again.
It gives you a canvas to paint on, which is what we're aiming to do.
And then the third option really is filtering your water. And when I say filtering, that third option, we're really talking about reverse osmosis, where we're stripping pretty much everything out of the water, and we've got a blank canvas, like you say, to completely go to town on and build the profile that we want. I mean, before going to RO, you can just get an inline carbon filter, get a sediment filter and a carbon filter, just stripping out stuff you don't, which is harmful for your beer, like the chlorines. And there's traces of particles in the water, like rust, which you just don't want in your beer. It's like if you've ever had a cup of tea from a Brita filter, it tastes so much better than straight tap water, and it's have that impact on your beer as well. So if you don't go full RO to start with, that I'd say is something you really need to do. Just have a cheap filter, an inline filter, which I think it costs 40 quid, my one, a 2-stage filter with a sediment filter and the chlorine. That will make you a
decent starting point. Your alkalinity still could be there, but you can treat that with acid, which is fine. But you need to have that base quality of water. Otherwise, beer's never going to shine like it should do.
But let's take a look at actually what a water's composed of, right? And I think it's important that we just mention at this point that when you're making beer at home, actually, what's in your glass, 95% of what's in your glass is water.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So you could have spent however much money on ingredients and equipment and brewed a beer that you're really happy with how the brew went. But if you've not paid any attention to water, you're not maximising your investment in both your ingredients and your equipment.
You're throwing all that money away, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yes.
Just.
I mean, it might taste okay.
Yeah. And it's never gonna shine like it can do.
Yes. And we are firm believers that we want to do everything we can to maximise our investment in ingredients.
And make commercial quality beer at home.
So let's take a look at what our water is composed of and the impact that those different elements can have actually on our experience as a drinker. Now, the first one, calcium. If I were to say to you, Fraser, what does calcium do in the finished glass? What would you say?
Well, if it's too high, you'll get a real chalkiness coming through in the beer. It will make it quite sharp as well if the levels are too high. Ideally, you want to keep it under 100 if you can. If you go up to 150, that's fine, but you really want to keep it down to around 100 parts per million.
Yeah.
So, under 100.
Okay, so the next one people might have seen on water reports or when they're looking at brewing software is magnesium.
Yeah, magnesium is not one you really need to worry about. It's not a flavour ion, so it's not going to impact any flavour profile at all on the beer. You need some for the health of the yeast, but your grain will give you all the magnesium you need. So you don't need to add it unless you're trying to tweak your profile. Like generally to increase sulfate, you'd use gypsum, calcium sulfates. But that increases sulfates, but it will increase your calcium as well. So if you've got your water like you got here, which you've got 95 parts per million of calcium, you don't want any more calcium. So you'd put magnesium sulfate in or Epsom salts. So you're using the magnesium to increase your sulfate levels without touching your calcium. But the magnesium, you're not going to taste any difference in the finished beer. It has no impact on the flavour. Right.
Okay, now we get on to probably the two most interesting, which we'll be referring to quite a lot. And the first is sulfate.
Yeah, it's one of the free ions that we're worried about, which impact flavour. And sulfate will enhance the hoppiness of the beer. It will give it a crisp bite at the end of a West Coast style where you want that crisp bitterness. It will really enhance that. So that's really important. East Coast styles, not so much. You want to keep away from the high sulfate, but for a beer which has got a lot of hop and bitterness, it will really enhance it.
So the next one then, which is chloride, right? Which is one that's quite close to our hearts.
Yeah.
What difference is that going to make?
It brings lots of softness, it enhances the malt flavours, and it just gives it that nice mouthfeel to the beer. It enhances, if you're using oats and wheat in your beer, it will really play to their strengths, and it will give that nice mouthfeel that you're looking for in that style of beer.
Yeah, and with, we're both fond of brewing hazy New England style beers. Chloride is a key component within that.
Yeah, you can't really do it without it.
Okay, and then bicarbonate, which is something that shows up on water reports.
Yeah, it's probably the enemy of brewing, really. You need to get rid of it out of your water because it's fighting with the acids. So you need to get alkalinity out of your water to get your pH in the correct zone. So as low alkalinity as you can get it, but we can go through that with the spreadsheets later to show where we're doing it.
Yeah.
But alkalinity needs to be removed.
Yeah.
One way or the other, with acid malts or acid itself.
So we've talked, Fraser, then about the kind of overall composition of water. We haven't yet touched on why pH is so important.
Well, I mean, we mentioned a bit earlier that when you're adding your liquor to your grains, the enzymes will need to convert starches into sugar, and they are at their optimum. If you can get the pH of that between 5.2 to 5.6, 5.3 ideally, the enzymes will convert and give you all the extract that you need, and it will, as we said, it will set the pH of that wort for its journey into the fermenter, into the kettle, into the fermenter. So you want to make sure that we got that pH of the mash, not the pH of the water that's important, it's the pH of the mash that is important.
Yeah.
and we can tweak that and calculate how it's going to affect it.
Yeah, and we talk about pH and water profiles together because they're intrinsically linked.
Yes.
Because of what we're doing to the water.
Yeah.
Right.
You change one thing, it will change it. I liken it to look like a seesaw. If you have acidity on one side and alkalinity on the other, and you're just trying to balance it for whatever additions you're using to keep it at, say, 5.3 pH. If you're using a dark beer, you've got a lot of acid in the malt, which will get rid of that alkalinity, and you just tweak your additions so that that level of this theoretical seesaw is perfect, so you're getting the same mash result every single time.
So now we've explored water's composition in a little bit more detail and the impact that the different elements can have on our finished beer. Be a good point now to start thinking about what our options are in terms of making decisions as a brewer to affect your water. Okay. Yep. And loosely speaking, we're going to break this into kind of 3 levels. We're going to do almost like a prerequisite entry level that every brewer should be doing, in our opinion, no matter where you are in your home brewing journey.
Yep.
Then we're going to move into a slightly more mid-tier where you want to develop your skills and your knowledge a little bit further. And then we're going to look at the more advanced level that really will give you the biggest impact. But it can be seen as a journey. For me, it really was a journey. I started with using my tap water and I did nothing, but very quickly thought, no, I need to do something.
Yeah.
And then I started doing something. Then I moved on to the mid-tier. And then with your help, I've really jumped wholeheartedly now into kind of more advanced thought processes and ways of working. And I personally think it's made a huge difference to the beers that I've been brewing. And really, that's down to you. And that's what we want to convey to everybody here, and why we were so passionate about getting you here, Fraser, because you've helped so many other brewers that I know of with this topic. It'd be great to be able to share that really widely. So let's focus on the first one then, which is kind of our prerequisite.
Without doing anything, you need to get rid of the chlorine out your water. If you don't, the beer will just taste awful, medicinal, band-aidy, plasticky. And it's easy to do. You can either just draw your water and leave it for 24, 48 hours. The chlorine will naturally go. If you want to do it quickly, just put a Camden tablet in it and that will flash it all off.
Yeah.
So that is the basic minimum that you need to do.
For anybody that maybe has heard of sodium metabisulfate, which is what we sell here at the Malt Miller, which is basically a powdered version of Camden tablets.
Yeah.
It's really easy to use because you don't need to crush the tablets up and split it across different vessels.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it, like you say, it just gets rid of chlorine.
Yeah, so many homebrew competitions I've helped judge and steward, and you get the example. You can tell that the quality of the homebrew is just immediately apparent. That plasticky taste that you get, which it masks all the flavours. All that money you put into the beer has gone completely because you're just getting this band-aidy, plasticky flavour coming through, and it's something which is so easy to get rid of. It has to be the first thing you have to do.
The next thing that can make a real difference is actually knowing what's in your tap water. So if you are choosing to use tap water, you can find out certain bits and pieces about what's in there, right?
Yeah, if you get onto your local water supplier, Thames Water for out down our way, put in your postcode, it'll tell you it'll give you most of the information you need will be there. Calcium, magnesium, sulfates, chlorides. A couple of bits may be missing, but if you email them, they may be able to give it to you. Or you can go and get a water report done. Murphy's do a really, really good one, and it will break it all down and give you all the information you need. But if you don't know what you're starting with, you haven't got a clue.
No. And it does give you the option then as a home brewer to know knowing what your water is, your base water that's coming out of your tap, or very closely, it can make you think about the beers that you want to brew,
Yeah. You may be brewing a beer which you do really well, and some beers you can't, they're always wrong, and that will probably be just down to your water. Your stouts may be great, and your light beers may be insipid and bland and not very nice.
Yeah.
And that is down to your water. So knowing what's in there and what you can do to change it, that's where you need to start. So you need to find out what is in your water.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yes, totally.
And then the third thing that you can do if you're just getting started with this is, if you know what your water is roughly because you've had, a look at your local water report, or you have paid for a service like the advanced water report we sell via Murphy's. If you know what you've got there, you've then got the option, say you're in an area like we are here in Swindon, where pretty much everything's high. What it does give you the option to do is then maybe buy something like Ashbeck.
Yep.
And cut your tap water using bottled water to just bring everything down, you know?
It just dilutes it down to a manageable level.
And you might not then need to necessarily worry about doing calculations or anything like that. But if you know that you're in a position where everything's quite high, cutting it in half will have an impact on those beer styles that you're trying to brew.
Totally. It just make it all a lot easier for you. Hard water is hard to brew with. Soft water is easy to brew with.
So as we move from the kind of entry level that we've talked about, somebody that wants to maybe take it the next step into that intermediate band, should we say? What would be your recommendations for them?
Well, if you're going down that route, you need to know what your water is. So you need to get your water report from your website, or getting, like you say, from Murphy's. They'll get you a breakdown completely of what's in your water. You can then decide to use either bottled water to help you with that. Or like I say, even Murphy's will give you a basic guide to what to add to your water to hit certain styles for a stout, for a pale ale. And that will just push you to improve your beer without having a lot of effort on your side of it, which we can do later on. But for the intermediate side, it's going to really help you. And they'll tell you what to do and what to add.
And it also gets you used to handling some of the ingredients that you're going to be adding, some of the salts, some of the minerals that you're going to be adding in to your water without, like you say, the full, both feet straight into the deep end for the advanced kind of stuff, which we'll come on to. The other thing as well that we would advise probably if you're at an intermediate level is, if you know what your base water is, you can plug that into some brewing software, some of the ones like the one on the Grainfather app or the one on Brewfather, select a profile, and it will give you a recommended amount of different minerals and salts to add, which again will do the same as that, the recommendations on the Murphy's report. It'll get you into a ballpark. It will push you closer to it. You're not going to be in a position where you can absolutely nail down every single
parameter.
But you are going to get closer. And again, you'll be able to see differences in the beer when you're drinking it.
Yeah, massively. I mean, from the basics to the intermediate side, every batch you'll see an improvement as you're doing it. It'll just be more focused and sharp.
So now we come on to pro level, I guess, should we say it, or Fraser level of kind of approach to water. And probably at this point, you're going to be looking at using RO water, or you're in a position where you've got excellent groundwater.
Yeah, if you're in an area with really soft water, RO you don't need to worry about, because the mineral levels will be in a range that you can just tweak yourself by adding gypsum, calcium chloride, salt to get the levels you want. If you're in a really hard area, you really need to start thinking about either using the bottled water as a base or going RO, really, to sort of like either dilute down or just use it completely.
Again, we're going to be using Brewing Software for this, right? And, as we've already said, there are loads available out there, but your particular piece
I tried a few of them, but I started off with Brewing Water. And it's one that I always use now because I know it really well, and it just gives you complete control about what you're doing. You can alter the levels by adding exactly what you want. You're putting 0.1 per million of gypsum, and you'll see that the sulfates and the chlorides are changing as you're doing it in real time on the screen. So you can nail exactly what you want, because at the top of the brewing water spreadsheet, it will tell you what your base water is. If it's RO, it'll probably be 0. And the style you want to achieve, like for West Coast IPA, say 133 sulfate, 56 chloride, and you're basically adding ingredients to get that matching that profile. So you're adding your calcium chloride, you're adding your salt, and you're adding your gypsum to match those figures. And as you're doing that, you'll see that the pH will be varying, because you put your grain bill into brewing water as well, so it knows what beer you're brewing, what grains are in there, and how that's going to impact the mash. And by changing the salt compositions, you'll see the pH changing as you're doing it. But you can tweak it with the amount of acid you're putting in to get the correct pH level.
So basically, what you get with brewing water is, whilst when you open it, and I certainly felt like this, it's like, wow, there's a lot here.
Yeah, it can be a bit daunting when you look at it.
Forcing yourself to play with it, don't necessarily do it for a particular brew. I think actually when you introduced me to it, we spent best part of a weekend pinging it back and forth to each other, just playing with different parameters. Yeah. You guys
changing something just to see what impact it would have.
Yeah, it accelerated my understanding of water composition, full stop. Regardless of whether I ever used it again, I understood more by the process of learning that tool. So this is when we're going to be at this level. This is where we're really going to be nailing into specific profiles that we want for our beers, whether that's a profile that we found on the internet, been given by a brewery, learnt about in a book, or whether it's a profile that you personally have built based on your preferences.
Yeah.
And we're going to be making those minute adjustments to all of the additions to get as close as we possibly can, if not spot on.
If you're starting with a base water, you can match it exactly as you need it. Yes, it's really easy to do. With all your levels underneath, like keeping calcium below 100, keeping sodium below 100, but you'll be able to match pretty much anything you need to do every single time.
So let's look now at some of the items you're going to want in your toolkit when you start diving into the world of adjusting water profiles.
Yeah.
Now, at that entry level, there's not many items you're going to need, really, right? But if we talk about some of the additions you're going to need, what would those be?
Well, certainly if you're getting your water report from yourselves, which is like the Murphy's water report, they will give you a recommendation of what to add to your water based on your profile that they've calculated for you, additions which they produce. So they do a carbonate reducing solution, which comes under two different names, doesn't it? CRS and
AMS.
AMS. And basically what that's doing, it's just reducing down the alkalinity of your water, but it's also adding in sulfates and chlorides while it's doing it. And then they will tell you to add in some dry liquor salts as well. So yeah, some salts which to add to hit certain profiles that they've recommended for you. They'll say there's like for pale ales, add that, for stouts, add that. And you can follow that and you'll get them styles in your brew and they'll be fine as a starter.
And of course, we mentioned as well, making sure you've got some sodium metabisulfate.
Yeah.
So if you're using...
flash off your chlorines before you start.
Yeah, if you're using tap water, just to completely get rid of it. Those three things as a starting point will start to make a difference for you.
If you're doing nothing at all, that'd be head and shoulders better than what you're making at the moment.
Then as we dive into the more advanced levels, where we're talking about maybe using RO water or bottled water such as Ashbeck or something, or if, like we've said, you're lucky enough to have really, really low starting points in your tap water, you're going to then want to have a bit of a wider library, aren't you, of additions?
Yeah, you need to get gypsum, which is calcium sulfate, calcium chloride, magnesium sulfates, plain salts will do as well. You need that as well. And bicarbonate of soda is always handy to have around because that will increase your mash pH. If you've made an error, you can always tweak it back with bicarbonate of soda.
Yep.
Because by the name, it's adding bicarbonate back into solution. So it's a really good tool for correction if you do something wrong, or if your water is really soft and you're trying to brew a stout and you want to up your bicarbonate levels. So that will help you as well.
The other thing you mentioned, Fraser, was about having some acidulated malt on hand during brew day at the beginning.
Yeah, it can be a lifesaver if you haven't quite got to grips with your mash and the pH is out. You can adjust it on the fly with some acid malts. If you've got some crushed ready to go, you'll find that 80 grams of acid malt will bring generally a 5 gallon batch down. If the pH is 5.5, 80 grams will drop it down by 0.1. So it'll go from 5.5 to 5.4, or 160 grams, it'll drop it down to 5.3. And if you do a check on that, you'll pretty much find it will be spot on 5.3, 5.2. So it works every time. It's really good, just as a fail safe.
And going back the other way.
Going back the other way, yeah, if you need more alkalinity in, you can put some bicarbonate soda in. So 1 gram, literally 1 gram, will just move it by 0.1 back up the other direction. That you've got to be really careful to weigh that out correctly, because you put too much in, you'll be chasing your tail. You'll be going one way and the other.
Yeah.
So, but give it a really good mix to get that mixed in properly into your mash. If you're recirculating with a grain father, it'll be really quick and easy to do. But yeah, 1 gram will move it by 0.1.
And we've also got the option of using liquid acids as well, right? So loosely speaking, you've got phosphoric and lactic acid that you can use, right?
Yeah, my preference is phosphoric. It's completely neutral, so it's not going to impart any flavour. Like if you use citric acid, by the name itself, it will give a citrusy note to the beer. That may not be a bad thing, but for me, I like to have it completely neutral. So what I'm adding is what I'm adding, and it's just doing one job, which is just to get the alkalinity down without giving any other flavour into the wort. And
then in terms of bits of equipment, you're going to want to have a few key items when you're diving into this stuff. Now, one kind of non-negotiable is a really good set of scales.
We're talking about fine margins with the salts, so you can be measuring out like 11.2 grams. So you need to get it exactly right. So a cheap set of jewellery scales, so you can weigh your salts out really precisely. That has to be on your bucket list to get.
Yeah.
And a pH meter.
Yeah. And you said that actually a pH meter, it's really good to have, because when you're getting going with this and you're making those adjustments and you're working with maybe the software and you're just getting into it, it validates
it's backing up. So you're taking the reading and it's coming out at 5.32 on your pH meter, and you predict it to be 5.3. You've nailed it.
Yeah. So that brings us to the close of part 1 of this deep dive into water chemistry, adjustments, water profiles, everything that we've talked about. Make sure that you tune in next week, because we're going to be taking things a step further, and we're actually going to be doing some practical demonstrations of the impact that some of the stuff we've talked about in this video can have on your beer throughout the process. It goes without saying, a huge thank you to you, Fraser, for taking your time to take us through this. If this has piqued your interest, make sure that you are subscribed to our channel. You've hit the bell for notifications, so that next week you'll be notified as soon as the second part of this video goes live, where we're going to take things a little bit further. And as ever, have a great brew.